All right, hey, welcome back to the channel. Down here with my GUNNR Odin 1:6x28 LPVO. Gonna spend some time talking about the torture testing that I've done to this optic, and yeah, as the title says, the failure that I got with that torture testing. But before I get too much into those details, I'm gonna talk a bit about the torture testing in itself and kind of the usefulness of doing that. I like to start out doing these torture tests with meaningful type, I guess you could say, the torture that I subject these things to. And what I mean by that is I like to do things to the scope that would be real life situations or circumstances that you might have. Bumping them around to kind of simulate a fall. Overuse of the turrets, meaning if you had this thing for a long time, longevity, how are these things going to hold up? Is the mechanism going to stay in place in there? And then just general environmental exposure. I like to expose these things to extreme cold, in this case, and extreme heat, different kind of elements, dirt, grit, debris, and just put them through the rigors of what the scope may be faced with out at the gun range or in some hunting situations. Typically, I don't get much in the way of failures during the torture test of doing that stuff. So then we up it up, take it up a notch and start doing some things that get a little more ridiculous and overuse and abuse to see what kind of abuse is going to take to get these things to fail. And what I mean by that is sort of what I started doing with this GUNNR Odin. Before I get into that though, I want to talk a bit about the usefulness of doing these torture tests, whether it's me doing them or somebody else. And that's really going to directly apply to what happened to this Odin optic. So these tests, how useful are these things? Well, general submissions to things like I was saying, knocking the scope around a little bit and how well it holds up, how it holds zero, do the mechanisms still work? Those things are great, but as we take it up a notch and get it going to extremes, only you can decide if you're going to be subjecting your optic, your firearms and stuff to really harsh conditions that are going to warrant this content really swaying you to purchase or not purchase one of these products. So in the case of this Odin, the first torture test content that I put out there, I subjected this optic to extreme cold. Now you can see I left this thing out if you watch that content. I left it out, kind of banged it around a little bit, nothing too extreme, but I knocked it around a little bit and froze this. Now this optic has been mounted up on a 22, a 5.56, and as well as an AR-9. So it hasn't been mounted up on anything that's really heavy recoil or anything that would jar it free. So I was kind of banging this thing around a little bit, kind of simulating if you dropped it, fell out of a tree stand or something like that. But the main focus of this torture test was going to be, is this thing waterproof and can it handle extreme cold temperatures? I think there's more of us that have these optics out in hunting situations that they are subjected to cold versus hot. So, a lot of deer hunting, hog hunting, whatever it may be, predator hunting, it gets really, really cold out there. Things stiffen up and stuff might stop working. So I started out, I'm in Michigan, it is winter, and it was easier to just start out doing the torture tests with this thing in the cold stuff. So let's get right to it. What happened to this optic? Well, that first test that I did, everything held up fine. The turrets were working fine. Reticle was still, everything was focusing with this thing, zooming in and out. The illumination was still working. So I upped it a notch. I took this thing and actually froze this scope in a solid block of ice. So I froze this thing up. Not a whole lot bigger than it, but I froze it up in a solid block of ice, which is kind of comical and interesting. And I did not expect any kind of a failure. Now this thing has a real high shock rating on it. And these optics, these GUNNRs are made from an aluminum that's a little more stout than what a lot of optic companies are using. So I really didn't expect any problems with this thing by freezing it in that little block. So froze it up. Nothing really was happening. I looked at it, got a little bit of footage with it frozen into that block. Temperatures warmed up and I left that block of ice out and watched it thaw. And this thing was sitting in a bucket for a good day and a half as that block of ice thawed out. So it was submerged for, we could say a good 36 hours. That's where the failure came in. So 2 failures that I've been able to identify with this GUNNR Odin 1-6x28. The first failure is the illuminated reticle quit working on it. So the battery is still good. I've since taken the battery out and tried it in one of these other optics. I do have the 1-10 Odin up there. Battery still works, but the illuminated reticle will not light up. The other thing that would take this optic right out of use if you had this out and this kind of a failure is there is water inside the scope. Now I've got some other footage here. I'll show you guys of the water inside there, but there's water inside the optic. And you know, at first I thought that water may have just got in a little between a lens or something in here, but I believe there's water entirely inside the whole optic. If you look, I've been kind of messing around with the turret up here, and there's water leaking, trying to come out of the whole scope. You can see water coming out of there. And when I go to look through the optic, looking through it the way you would be generally looking through the scope, nothing is magnified or focusing like it normally would. It actually, when I'm looking through the scope this way, it looks just like looking through a scope this way. So there's some, you know, mechanisms have messed up inside this optic. So those are the failures I've got with this. Now, GUNNR sent me both of these optics. I've got this 1-6 and this 1-10 here. And the plan was, hey, compare these 2 optics, review these 2 optics, and do some torture testing on them. Well, torture testing is cut short because this is a complete failure on this optic, and with the shock rating that these things have and this quality of this material on it, I really didn't expect this thing to hit me a failure like this. Now, they do have a lifetime, I'd like to more say limited lifetime warranty on these. If you do a little bit of research in some of the forums and the groups on this kind of these kind of products, you'll see that originally these GUNNR optics, they had the lifetime warranty with some restrictions in place. They've since kind of loosened that up a little bit. I am going to reach out and see if I can get a replacement on this because my hands are tied. I can't compare it to the 1-10, and this thing will be off to the scrap pile at this point because there's nothing I can do with it. But yeah, it's kind of a shame. I really was expecting more from these GUNNR Odins. This has been a kind of a treat to use when I had this thing mounted up. The glass is fabulous on it. The turrets work really, really good on it. You can see the water coming out of it right there, splashing out of it. But getting back to the last thing here before I end this. Now, how useful is this torture test? How detrimental is this torture test? Well, you know, how many people are going to have one of these optics submerged for 36 hours? Now, I can tell you when I first put this thing in a bucket of water a few times and I had it in there for a little bit, there were no issues with it. And that's probably a little bit more reminiscent of what's going to happen if you're out in the field and you're hunting, you slip or something and your rifle lands in the drink for a minute and it gets wet. I, in good faith can say I don't think you would have a problem with that, with water getting in this thing. Now, if you had a flood in your basement, my little gun room here, if this thing flooded up and this was down here and submerged for a long time, would that be enough of a deal breaker to be worried about something like that? Only you can decide. But in this case, this is a failure. So I am being, 100% transparent here with putting it out there that the illumination failed and the seals somewhere in here have failed. But aside from that, the optic, the turrets and everything are still, the mechanisms are still working. I can't tell if I'm getting a focus out of it, but everything's still moving. So being frozen, I don't think anything is cracked per se on the outside, aside from some seals. Both the lenses are still good too. There's no actual breakage in them. And I wish you guys could really see that water sloshing around in there. But so the value of these torture tests and the extremes we take them to, you got to weigh that. Is this a torture test that's taking it beyond what you really care about? Like, you're not going to be putting your scope underwater for that long. Or do you really want it to really pass all these tests? So anyways, hey, this is the GUNNR Odin 1-6x28 first focal plane optic. And we have a failure to maintain its ability to be waterproof, I guess you could say. So Thanks for checking back into the channel. I hope you have some more content on these GUNNR optics. Again, we do have the 1 to 10 by 28 here, and was hoping to get some comparisons going with these. So thanks for checking back into the channel, and get yourself on out there and keep on shooting.